I'm thrilled today to be joined by State Representative Gloria Johnson, who is running against Marsha Blackburn from the great state of Tennessee for the United States Senate seat. Gloria Johnson is from Eastern Tennessee, from the city of Knoxville. She represents that area in the state legislature. We're thrilled to have her with us today on the warning as we continue to bring unfiltered some of the leading Democrats in the country who, unfortunately, you're not going to see much on the Acela corridor media because they are not incumbents yet in the United States Senate. So when you're a challenger running against an incumbent, it's a hard road. But when you're more than 100 days out, Gloria Johnson in a tight race, behind but in striking distance. You don't want to be like Trump in this business where you have your best day 130 days before the election. You want to have it on election day. And one thing I would say, to Tennessee voters that are listening, I said this to John McCain as he was climbing back from being in last place, and I mean dead last, in the Republican primaries in 2007, going to 2008, was that we needed to be ahead on exactly one day, and that was election day. And we needed to be up on the top of the mountain on that day. Now, election day starts a little earlier these days, in that there's early voting and all of that stuff, which warning viewers are familiar with. But no matter all of that, Gloria Johnson has momentum, and she's running against really a person that it astonishes the imagination that the very same state that would send Al Gore Sr. to the United States Senate, Al Gore Jr. to the United States Senate, Howard Baker to the United States Senate, Lamar Alexander to the United States Senate, Fred Thompson to the United States Senate, Bill Frist to the United States Senate, people of astonishing character, astonishing accomplishment, astonishing intellect, both parties. You get Marsha Blackburn, whose list of crazy statements is longer than the Mississippi River. And with that, it's really my pleasure to introduce someone who represents better for Tennessee, which is important because Tennessee is a vital state of the union. One of the great states of our union, a really special, vibrant, alive place in America, a center of our American culture, the beating heart in many ways musically of our American civilization. Gloria Johnson, welcome to the warning.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, we're going to correct that mistake in the Senate this election cycle in November. So we are excited about that.
Okay, so I ran Arnold Schwarzenegger's campaign in 2006, which was a terrible Republican year. We won decisively by 17 points. So you can do this in Tennessee. This is good news for you now that Kamala Harris is on top of the ticket. It's energized Democrats. It will energize women voters, young women voters, energize Black voters to turn out. So all of these things are good for you at a foundation level because, politics isn't fair. Sometimes you have the wind with you at your back, and other times you have the wind blowing into you, holding you back. And so if you're a Democrat in Tennessee, right, after the debate, not good news. You're in a much better position, but you're running against a very polarizing, very weak, really very strange woman, a very extreme woman who says a lot of crazy things, who until very recently in American life, right, we just have been found unfit, right? That, hey, we want to put, this person into the Senate, no way. But she's a Marjorie Taylor Greene of sorts, really a predecessor, but deeply linked to her, like J.D. Vance is, out there on the
Yeah.
fringe, antithetical to kind of the tradition of statesmanship and stateswomen out of the state of Tennessee. But how are you going to beat her? How are you going at her? Tell us your story, introduce yourself, and just take as long as you want, because we're going to ask everybody watching to send money and support and get involved in the campaign.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I decided I've been in the state house for 8 years. I've gone back and forth. They've redistricted my district once. I won it after it went from a +2D district to a +12R district. I'm one of just a handful of folks in Tennessee who have flipped a red seat multiple times, because this last time they gerrymandered just my block out of my precinct and put it into the only other Democratic seat in Knoxville. And they thought I would run against my colleague, which I refused to do. So I moved 6 blocks back into the district I'd lived in for 30 years that they had redrawn, so I couldn't win it, and I won it again. And I'd been thinking about this from January of 2023. I just thought, Tennessee, which many in the country saw a little over a year ago when we had to go to the well and speak to the thousands of folks who showed up from the Covenant shooting, after the Covenant shooting, where we lost 3 students and 3 staff members. The thousands just gathered at the Capitol, and it was Covenant families, but it was also families from Knoxville who were tired of gun violence, families from Memphis who were tired of gun violence. It was students, it was parents, it was grandparents, it was teachers, and they gathered by the thousands every day. And the legislature, the Republicans refused to acknowledge them. They just refused to allow us to, and we have welcoming and honoring every morning. On that particular day, they did not have welcoming and honoring. We had gotten there early. Parents had showed up. We started at 9. I got there about 7:30 just to talk to the parents who were showing up to see how they were feeling. And mothers with tears in their eyes just told me, I just dropped my kids at school. I hope they're safe when I go to pick them up or when I go to meet the bus. This is a community that was hurting so badly. And then when my Republican colleagues walked past them onto the House floor, they wouldn't even make eye contact with them, just not even acknowledging that they were there. And so we felt very strongly about being able to acknowledge, being able to tell them that we saw them and we heard them and we cared about their issues, and we were going to fight for gun sense legislation. And either we were not called on or our mics were cut every time we tried to speak to that and just recognize that they were there. And so finally we just decided to go to the well. And just the fact, the way people showed up and continued to show up gave us hope, really, for the first time in a really tough legislature where Democratic norms were just being put by the side. Not having debate on bills, not calling on people, cutting people's microphone just because you didn't like what they said. This is not how the process is supposed to work. And people all over the country, not just Tennesseans, saw that. And so what happened in those days that everyone gathered together, all the thousands of people, it turned into a movement, or it boosted a movement that was already rolling sort of under the surface, but it just blew it up. And so all of these people that came from all over, they sang together, they chanted together, they ordered pizza and had lunch together. They talked to each other and about the things that they cared about, and just really committed to support each other on through to this election. And so we've been building that movement and building that momentum. And people, it's a multiracial, multi-generational, and multi-partisan movement. I had 50 Republicans at my kickoff. That doesn't happen. And we have a lot of Republicans and independents on board, and just knew that if we wanted to fix things in Tennessee, we needed someone running at the top of the ticket who was going to speak to Democratic values, get that message out statewide, and help flip some of these down ballot House and Senate seats, as well as winning a U.S. Senate seat for a Democrat. And we are absolutely going to do that. People say that a Democrat can't win in Tennessee. We are not a red state, we're a non-voting state. We are typically 50th or 51st in voter turnout. Marsha Blackburn won in 2018 by 200,000 votes. There are 300,000 Democratic voters who haven't voted the last few cycles because they think their vote doesn't matter. We're talking to those voters. We're not operating on the 2018 maps. Demographics are changing in Tennessee, and we are going to get those 300,000 voters out because they recognize how important this is. We win by expanding the map, getting those voters to the polls. And when we do that, we win this U.S. Senate race. Plus, we flip down ballot House seats and state Senate seats. And that's what we're going to do. And they're helping us along the way. I mean, when you look at the top of the ticket in the Republican Party, you've got an adjudicated rapist who has been convicted of 34 felonies. And then you've got a vice presidential candidate who believes women should stay with their abusers and also believes in a federal abortion ban and thinks women without children are useless to society. And then you've got Marsha Blackburn, who voted against the Violence Against Women Act, voted against equal pay for women, believes in a federal abortion ban, and even questions Griswold versus Connecticut and the decision that gave us access to birth control. It is remarkable that these three folks think that women are going to vote for them. And the reality is this puts Tennessee women and girls in grave danger. We have one of the strictest abortion bans in the country. We only have an exception for ectopic and molar pregnancies and dead fetuses. That's it. The rest for life of the mother, not covered. Rape and incest, not covered. Tennessee forces a 10-year-old girl to carry her rapist baby. Tennessee forces a woman. They give more rights to a violent rapist. A violent rapist has the right to choose the mother of their child, but a woman can't choose not to have a rapist baby. This is what Tennessee is like. And here in this state, we have got more than 1/3 of our state with no OBGYN. We've got 1/3 to 1/2 of the state with no delivery room. That 10-year-old girl could be an hour and a half away from a hospital or an OBGYN. And we know that children carrying a pregnancy are 2 times more likely to die than adult women in a pregnancy. And in Tennessee is one of the highest states with maternal mortality. They're putting women and girls in danger in this state. And they don't think we're going to get to the polls. It's going to be a different story for Tennessee this year.
Talk to me about that on the ground, the extremism of all of this with actual women. Without giving a speech about it, I did the Tim Ryan campaign. I was deeply involved in it. It's the best political campaign I've ever been involved in. It was flawless campaign. The team that ran it did an extraordinary job. Brandon Hall, the media consultant, Dave Chase, the campaign manager, took the Republicans $57 million in spending to defeat Tim, who had J.D. Vance defeated by August if Schumer had spent $5 million on the race. In that campaign, the top of the ticket went down by 26 points. And Tim went down by 5, right? So meaning if the race goes 17-18, J.D. Vance isn't in the Senate, and you're at the top of the ticket in this race, so you can clearly talk about this. So I'm struck by this, which is when you think about this election, as somebody who's talked about these issues for 9 years, I can't think of an alchemy, a mix of things to say to the ladies to more directly and better improve on what you said, which is that you have a power that you have not used, that now is the time to use. It's the time to use this power. If you can't persuade women 18 years of age, 20 years of age, I have a 20-year-old. A lot of the college kids making fun of Biden's age on TikTok, which blurs the difference in the celebrity-laden culture between the threat and the celebrity. And it's just one more kind of reality show mishigas as opposed to the deep threat that you just articulated. When you see women who are undecided and confused about the race, about these issues, what is it that you say to them persuasively that you don't belong with this crowd in a quasi-religious cult, right, taping bandages to the side of your head, venerating this messianic figure right now who's a convicted felon, the worst president in American history, also too old to be president, at 78 to 82. But what do you say to them, right, to women as a women about a woman who's clearly on the side of all of this insanity?
Well, I think that a lot of women have made this decision already. I mean, a lot of women I didn't have to convince. They've already come over. That's why I'm beating Marsha 49 to 43% with women, is because they're getting it. But mostly I have the conversation because I think of it in terms as equality. Women aren't equal if we don't have bodily autonomy. And sometimes when I talk to women and make that statement, they think, oh, I never thought of it that way. That, we are not equal. We are second-class citizens if we do not have autonomy over our own body. These are decisions that need to be made with a woman and her doctor, her family, her God, but not a legislature in the doctor's office or the governor in the doctor's office. And they really understand that. I mean, they really understand. And you also talk about, if we want to decrease the number of unwanted pregnancies, what we've got to be serious about in this state, we have an expanded Medicaid. Give women access to affordable health care so they're not seeing the doctor the first time when they find out they're pregnant. They will, if they're going to a doctor throughout their life, they're going to know more about their health. Are they healthy enough to carry a pregnancy? All of these things. But since we don't give all women access to health care, they're not necessarily healthy when they get pregnant. And so if we want to be sure of that, we want to make sure they have access to health care. We want to make sure women have access to contraception. I brought a bill this past year in the legislature, which is a right to contraception in IVF. And not a single Republican voted for it. They say they're not trying to take it, but we have them on tape in a ProPublica article. They got a tape of the Right to Life folks in Tennessee legislators. And in that tape, they said, let it die down about Dobbs, and then we'll start talking about contraception and IVF. We don't need to do that right now. So we've already heard them in private saying that they were coming after it. So they can lie all they want, but I'm going to call them out on their lies. Marsha Blackburn has told the same lie. She voted against contraception and IVF in the Senate and said, oh, nobody's coming for it. But then you've got her on tape questioning Griswold. So which is it, Marsha?
Extremism is well documented. How do you think about these national security issues where she has adopted a position that is contrary to everybody before now that has represented Tennessee in the United States Senate? They'd all be appalled. Fred Thompson who I knew well, would be appalled. Lamar Alexander is on the other side of these issues. Vice President Gore is a generation of Tennesseans, Howard Baker. And so I think about whenever I see, anybody who remembers the 1980s, right? This is the most astonishing thing. Howard Baker was obviously a legendary Tennessee senator, statesman, chief of staff to President Reagan. And they're negotiating the end of the Cold War. Ronald Reagan, very tough on the Russians, and Marsha Blackburn, when you look at the world, has seemed to embrace this philosophy of Trumpian appeasement and isolation. And I don't know how you think about it, but I want to give you a chance to talk about her on these views, these issues in a very dangerous world. But I'll just say before I turn it over to you, I mean, this is a person who doesn't know what she's talking about, isn't competent about the issues in the world. And when you see the things that come out of her mouth, I think it's really demonstrative of how cocooned and bubbled this club is, because any person who's anywhere for as long as she's been there now, right? We can train you to be a brain surgeon in 6 years from, right? From never having cut into anything but an apple, right? And you would think you would pick up some of this stuff, but she seems immunized to knowledge about how the world works and its interconnectedness. And it's silly. And I don't mean this in a chauvinistic way, but I say this as someone who's lived in California for decades and somebody who grew up on the East Coast. To everybody on the coast, Tennessee is a mega state with some of the best universities in the country, big, thriving cities. Nashville is an American mega city. This is a giant economy in the world, in the country. And this is a backwards, ignorant, know-nothing who's the United States senator that you're challenging. And I'd just like you to talk about her from the prism of, wow, this is one of 100 people in the world making life and death votes and decisions about our national security, and how far afield she has gone from the tradition of moderation in Tennessee and the tradition of common sense in Tennessee.
Oh, absolutely. She's just nowhere close to where the average Tennessean is. Because, I mean, she has been in DC for 21 years and, like you say, hasn't learned a thing. That's one thing I hear a lot from the Republicans. She's been there 21 years, has the same talking points, and hasn't done a thing. And she doesn't talk to the people either. She hasn't had a town hall in 7.5 years. The last one she had was pretty disastrous. And so on this tour, I'm going to all 95 counties. My tour dates are posted on my website. Anyone who wants to show up can show up and ask questions and talk with us. And she's had only closed door meetings with county officials that I have heard of. There was one event she was supposed to do a couple of weeks ago that was publicized with Republicans at a VFW hall, and she didn't show up for that. That's the only one I know that was actually out published at all where people could come. And she didn't show up, and they said she had strep throat. So I don't know where she is. I don't know what she's doing, but she's not talking to the people. And yesterday I was in 4 different counties. I started in Overton County, then I went to White County, and then Cannon County, and then Rutherford County, and talked to well over 100 people yesterday in all of those counties about the things that concern them and about the things that they care about. And she just hasn't been seen. like you say, she's in a bubble. I find that with my colleagues and my Republican colleagues in the legislature. I think they go to Republican meetings in church and that's it. My whole day, I talk to Republicans all day long because I live in East Tennessee. If I'm talking to my family or if I'm talking to folks in East Tennessee, I'm spending a lot of my time talking to Republicans. So I listen to people. I want to listen to what people have to say. But here's the interesting thing. They want to paint me as this extremist. But the reality is 80% of Tennesseans, urban, rural, and suburban, want to do something about gun sense legislation. They want universal background checks. They want safe storage laws, and they want red flag laws. 80% of Tennesseans agree on that. Used to, you couldn't talk about guns in Tennessee, but now you better talk about gun sense legislation. And then with women, with abortion, the same thing. 80% of people in Tennessee, urban, rural, suburban, all parties want abortion care at some level. We don't all agree on where the line may be, but 80% want that care at some level. And she does not. And neither do the supermajority in the state legislature. They are the extremists. 81% want cannabis, medical cannabis, 60% want recreational cannabis. They won't even discuss it. Marsha Blackburn gets more money from the NRA than I think anybody, certainly from Tennessee ever did, but she's one of the top receivers of those dollars. She also voted against capping insulin at $35 in the state with one of the highest numbers of diabetics per capita. She voted against negotiating drug prices for seniors. Tennesseans have not expanded Medicaid. People are struggling with their health care. She voted to repeal the ACA multiple times. She is the extremist. She is not on board. And she is not even trying, it seems, to get out and talk to the regular folks that she's supposed to represent. She lies consistently, makes horrible bigoted statements with no facts whatsoever to back it up. Somebody said, Gloria, you need to counter every one of her lies. I said, good grief, we'd have to add 3 people to our staff. I mean, it's remarkable. I talk to people, politicians lie. We should not expect expect politicians to lie or elected officials to lie. We should be held to a higher standard of telling the truth, having integrity, and being transparent about what we're doing. But in Tennessee, man, they want to do everything behind closed doors.
Will she debate you?
Well, that's the question. Our primary is August 1st. So we will see after the primary if she is going to debate me. And certainly we're going to be asking for debates. We will drag her if she won't debate because it has to be done. She should be able to get before the people and answer some tough questions. I'm ready to do it. She's been there 21 years. If she can't answer these questions, she doesn't need to be there. I say that all the time about the State House where I serve. And when we had orientation, the leader of the Republican Party actually told us, well, you can use your badge to get into the secret hallways so you don't have to talk to press and constituents who are in the hallways if you don't want to. And all I could think was, I'm not using some secret hallway lurking around behind the scenes. I came there. I was elected by the people. They need to know what I'm doing. I need to talk about what I'm bringing, the legislation I'm bringing. I need to answer questions about it. And how are they going to know what I'm doing if I refuse to talk to the press or if I refuse to talk to constituents? It's remarkable to me that everything they want to do, they want to hide from the press and they want to hide from the people. And I guess if I had the policy and brought the policy they did, I'd want to hide too. But we should expect our elected officials to be upfront, to answer questions and be transparent about what they are doing.
Representative Johnson, have you ever used the secret passage? I would use it all the time. I would still talk to the people, but I would use it all the time.
I've shown it to people, and one time there was a voucher vote, and there was somebody back in those hallways pulling the strings. So I went back to see who was pulling the strings.
I would do a hybrid approach. Let me ask you this question. So the Republican high card, right, as far as an issue where they are on the right side of majority opinion in the country, is on the question of the border. And I had a consistent position on this personally, going back to the 90s, right? I was always a very pro-immigration Republican, and the deal that I always supported, Bush, McCain, the Kennedy Compromise, was that you had a population in the country illegally. They were here illegally because they were let in without much difficulty, and everybody understood that the labor market required this workforce that was there. People wanted the border secured. They didn't want anyone punished, and they just couldn't get it done in Washington. You have, whatever the number may be, the biggest issue that the Republicans have to go at a Democrat in a red state, right, in terms of its most recent dispositions electorally, is immigration. So what do you say about immigration, about the border? And do you recognize as a Democrat how important honesty is as an issue? And I'll give you two examples. When Senator Menendez is arrested, gold bar sewn in the jacket, Chuck Schumer responds, he's been a great representative for the people in New Jersey, right? I'd say that as a native New Jerseyan. When Alexander Mayorkas says, the border's never been more secure, you understand, or you're a senator on TV who was looking at Biden in the aftermath of the debate, and you say, no, he's the wisest guy in the land, he's never looked better, that you lose honesty as an issue to a side filled with extreme fascists who run on an architecture of lies. How important that is. And I just wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, no, I think that I would not feel the same about Menendez. I think that it doesn't matter when our guys break the law, their guys break the law. You've broken the law, and that's the way it is. I think we do need to definitely be honest about that. I think that that's critically important, and to be honest about the fact that we do have a serious situation at the border, and we do need to fix it. But the thing is, we can't. And there, like you talked about, there have been deals in the past. It always breaks down, and right now we know that it's broken down because they need to use it in this campaign. I firmly believe that. It is something that gins up Tennessee Republicans. But we have to be honest about, what's really happening. Do we need more security? Yes. Have we tried to put more security? Yes. I think that the last bill that was offered had pretty much everything in it the Republican wanted. They had a problem with one piece of it, and they were misinterpreting that piece, as I understand it. But it seems like we can at least get some measures going so we can get the work started. Having a path to citizenship, and also making things more secure at the border. And I think that there are enough people that should be able to come to agreement. Sadly, it may not be, or it will be after the election. But that's why this election is so important. Let's get people who believe in actually doing the work, and not just keeping it out there as an issue to run for office on. But we're supposed to be doing the work of the people, and the people want solutions. But this idea, they're taking our jobs, it's just not true, because there's so many jobs out there, there are not enough people. when on my 95 county tour, I was just in Granger County, Tennessee, and Granger County is famous for tomatoes. And a 23-year-old immigrant came to my event, and I asked her what her day was like. And 23-year-old young woman, she said, well, she has to get her mother to work at the farm where she works at 6 a.m. and then she goes to work. And then she works until the sun goes down at 9 o'clock. And I thought, who in Granger County wanted that job? You know, I don't think that most Americans would take that job. And there are plenty of those jobs to have if they wanted them. The reality is folks are coming here, they're working really hard at jobs that we desperately need. We don't need our plants and our food to die on the vine. And so we've got to create that path for folks who come here and are doing everything right, but we can also secure the border and do all of those things. And that's the type of legislation we need to see to solve this problem. But to dehumanize and not respect the human dignity of these folks who are coming over here to improve their lives and work hard and love this country. And we have to do better. We have to do better for us and for them, because I think about growing up, I think about even 15 years ago, 20 years ago in Tennessee. We didn't ask where you came from. We didn't ask how you worshiped. We didn't ask who you loved. We just pitched in with our community and helped. Everybody together, working together. It didn't matter if you were a different religion. It didn't matter if you were a different race. I'm not saying there hasn't been bigotry and racism. There has been, but it was a shameful thing to be, you know. But most people just worked together and didn't care if the fact that two women down the street are married has absolutely nothing to do with how your family is doing. If your family is struggling, it's not because two women down the street are married. Your family's struggling because you live an hour and a half from a hospital. You don't have access to affordable health care and affordable prescription drugs. You don't have a well-resourced classroom for your child, and you're making minimum wage in Tennessee, which is the federal minimum wage, which is $7.25 an hour. You're working 2 and 3 jobs to try to keep food on the table. Those folks don't have time to follow politics. They're trying to stay alive. They're trying to keep the lights on and food on the table. And Marsha Blackburn doesn't believe in raising the wage. How do you make $7 an hour or $10 an hour even, and pay childcare $15 an hour? The math does not work. They have no concern for regular families. Marsha Blackburn works for lobbyists and corporations. We just finished a quarter of fundraising. More than 70% of the money I raise comes from Tennessee. Only 40% of the money she raises comes from Tennessee. Much of it comes from Texas. Who does she represent? Tennessee families need help. They need someone working for them, not for lobbyists, not for big pharma and the NRA and big oil. That's who she's working for.
I can't imagine that people who spend 40 years in the United States Senate, and I've been around it as an institution, right? It's mind-blowing. And, you know, I think about it, right? You know, if I wound up in the US Senate, you think about even 3 terms, right? 18 years is a long time, right? But like, you know, 12 years, whatever, as you point out, right? She's been there for 20 years. She hasn't done the town hall in 7.5 years. Why does she do this? Like, do you ever think about that? Like, what is she?
I can tell you
What does
that.
she makes $167,000 a year. What a senator makes, right? She would make more as a lobbyist. It's what does she dig about this? What's so great about it?
You know, I don't. I think you mentioned she's an odd person. I mean, we were on the same airplane. I had already been seated, and I saw this woman walking past me. I was like, who is that? I was like, oh my goodness, that was Marsha. And so I thought, well, it's stupid for us to be on the same plane and not to say hello or anything like that. So as we were getting off the plane, I waited at the top of the jetway, and she came up, and I said, "Hi, Senator Blackburn. We're running against each other. Just wanted to said my name. I said, just wanted to say hello. It'd be silly for us not to say hello when we're sitting on the same plane." And she just stared at me and just like, and I mean, how do you just not say hello? But it was as if she had no idea what to do. And I'm thinking, you're a US senator, you meet constituents all the time. Technically, I'm a constituent of hers. And she couldn't even say hello. And then she felt so awkward. I tried to make light of the situation, and I said, hey, why don't we take a picture together and we can both post, look who I met on the plane. And then she looked at me and she said, oh, I can't do that, and started walking away. It was just the strangest interaction, and I just I don't know how you couldn't just stop and say hello and make, pleasantries with somebody. It was weird to me.
The answer to that question, I can answer this question. I can answer the why now that I have that information, is that people would come up to me during like the peak of House of Cards. And,
Mhm.
and a friend of mine, a guy named Jay Carson, was like really involved in conceiving of the show and helping make it realistic. But people would be like, "Is all of this like House of Cards?" And I'd be like, "No, it's like Veep." And, right? It's like Veep, right? It's like national politics is like a giant Veep episode, right? If you detach and you sit back and watch it, and she's like a character in Veep, cloistered, voting against the interests of the state, which is a gigantic state. And let me just say again, right, for people who haven't spent time in Tennessee that'll watch this, from around the country, big distance between Knoxville, where you're from, and the Mississippi River and Memphis. And so you need to tie a ribbon right across the state to a different part of the state about these ideas. Why don't you talk about that? Just what it's like to campaign. What is your day like? How many hours a day are they torturing you with fundraising calls that will increase, if you become the nominee here, of course. And what is that day like, getting around doing the things you need to do? And as you look at this from a forward basis, if you're the nominee and you have about let's 3 months or so in real time to run the campaign about her, just talk about how you're gonna build on what you've been doing in order to bring that home, how to embrace the underdog, status, capitalize it against somebody who's been there too long, who's become too strange by their time in power, that lives like they're a character in the Hunger Games off in Panem, completely walled off from the regular people. And I just think that that's such a huge part of this, is her aloofness from reality, from normalcy, from community, as she lives in this terrarium, under the Capitol dome.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to make a difference, because what people know about me is I get out and talk to folks. I've flipped red districts multiple times because I'm not afraid to talk to people and talk to people across the aisle. I have talked to so many people on this trail who wanted to see her, were in DC, but she wouldn't see them because of whatever their belief, if it was Moms Demand Action or some of these folks that she just refused to see. And I don't do that. In my office in Nashville, I don't refuse anyone. If we can't sit down and have a conversation and disagree, and I can tell you what my position is, and I can listen to your position. I mean, I think that's what it's about. And people, certainly the people in my district in Knoxville, know that's who I am. I have people all the time tell me, Gloria, we don't agree on much, but I do trust you, and I know that you will listen to me. And so that goes a long way. But she has no repertoire like that with the people. And so my day, you know, yesterday it started at 7 o'clock. We had to be in Overton County, which is for 2 hours from where I am. So we had to get up and be there by 10 o'clock. And then we spent an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half with those folks. Then we drove 40 minutes to the next county and spent an hour to hour and a half with those folks, talking to them, asking questions, finding out what were the biggest issues in their community that they felt like. And then I got in the car, drove another hour to our next stop in Cannon County and met with folks there and did the same thing, talked again about everything in their particular community, what they saw. And then, of course, our last stop was at 5:30 last night in Rutherford County, and spent an hour and a half there talking to folks. And it was really great. There were so many young people there. And one of the fascinating things that I find is young people, most of these meetings are very often senior citizens, but we've got a lot of young people showing up as well. And the young people are engaged, they're paying attention. And so I love it when they come, and people always get excited when the young folks are there. But they're excited about this race. And I'm seeing more excitement about this race than I have seen across the state of Tennessee in a long time. I go around, I'm not new to visiting counties across the state. It's 5.5 hours to Memphis from Knoxville, and then it's 3 hours or 2.5 hours up to Upper East Corner. So 8 hours, or 8 or 9 hours across the whole state, and we've been traveling the whole thing. But really, it's about listening to people and trying to educate them on some of the issues that they don't quite completely understand, like legislation that's been passed that they rarely get to hear about. They pass bills so quickly here in the Tennessee State Legislature that no one knows about them until it affects them, and they don't want to debate these bills. They've almost gotten rid of debate on legislation. I guess it's because they are ashamed to really hash out their ideas, because they're not. It's mostly hate legislation, and it doesn't help regular families. But Marsha is not getting this experience and talking to this people. She thinks she can show up with an arbicider name and win this election, and it's not going to be like that this year, because people are not happy with what she is doing, and they're paying more attention than ever. And so I'm making sure that I'm talking to as many people as possible, listening to as many people as possible, and I won't ever stop doing that. Every year I am in DC, I will continue to visit every county. I can't tell you how appreciative people are when they say, thank you so much for coming to our county. Nobody's been to our county in years. No one has done a true 95 county tour that's posted that anyone can come to. And it's sad, because these rural counties have needs. And everybody, when they're running for office, say, oh, we're going to help the rural counties, but they never do. And if you don't know the faces and you don't have conversations with those people, how do you know what they need? She doesn't get to tell people what they need. She doesn't get to listen to lobbyists and corporations that fund her campaign. And she doesn't learn from them. What the hardworking Tennessee families in her district need, she has no idea. She hasn't had to struggle to make a light bill. She hasn't had to struggle to put food on the table. And if you don't listen to folks, how do you even understand that? I've struggled to pay a light bill before. I mean, that's just a fact. And I'm not ashamed of that. I am in the same category as far as earning as the majority of Tennesseans. She's far and above that and doesn't understand how the majority of Tennesseans live. And all these politicians, well, I'm going to cut taxes. Well, what they need to ask her is whose taxes are you going to cut, Marsha? Because she's going to cut taxes for the wealthy and corporations. It's exactly what they're doing here, and we've seen her do it there. Nobody's helping hardworking families with their taxes. Democrats want to do that, and people need to understand that. Need to understand that raising the wage and giving people access to health care lifts up your state, lifts up your economy. And if you don't understand simple economics, you can't help the people that need it the most. And we have a lot of vulnerable people in Tennessee. She wants to get rid of the Federal Department of Education. What do they fund in Tennessee? They fund free and reduced lunches for so many children in Tennessee that go to bed hungry. They fund special education. I taught special ed for 27 years. My students, because of federal programs, got the services they needed. My special ed students, I had a higher graduation. 95% of my special ed students graduated because they got the services they need. That's a higher graduation rate than the whole high school with regular kids. And so when we provide these services for kids, they get what they need. I had kids going to college, going straight into careers because we did work study their last semester. And you can't say that about the entire school. So, and then that money also, the third pot of that money goes to fund Title I, which is making sure we have equity in our under-resourced schools, to make sure that those under-resourced schools have the resources they need to have a well-resourced classroom, to have more social workers, because they need more of those services. That's what those federal dollars do, and she wants to shut it down. The Speaker of our House, Cameron Sexton in Tennessee, wanted to refuse the federal funding. It basically came down to, if you don't take the federal dollars, you don't have to follow civil rights guidelines. This is who they are. It is remarkable. They do not care about the average family in Tennessee.
I had a visit to Washington a couple months back, and I was at this premiere, and I sat next to a Democratic congressman, and he was sitting next to another Democratic congressman. I was like, "How you doing?" And he was like, "Good." He goes, "But he goes, I'm much better than his colleague." And he is this guy, he's an impressive guy. He is, Rhodes Scholar, Harvard, put himself through, came up from nothing. He goes, he's got the same job as Lauren Boebert. And a few months ago, I spent time with Hakeem Jeffries and Tim Ryan, who was in the Congress for 20 years. A lot alike in terms of just absolutely unflappable, like the Yoda, right? Like the Buddha, calm temperaments. And I thought about myself, right? Like in the House.
Mm-hmm.
And the day that I broke a board over like Matt Gates's head, right? It's not like the media would be, that I'm going to get a ribbon or something for restraining myself for like 800 days, right? Until like I finally did it. And the reason I asked the question is, you're subjecting yourself to a level of self-abuse, right? By doing this, right? That victory means, right, you're going to be like hanging out with Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz, and your colleagues will be some of the worst Americans out of 330 million people, right? Which is like really bad people who aren't currently incarcerated for violent crimes, right? Some of the wackiest, most hypocritical Americans, right, that there are amongst all of us, villainous characters, some of them. And I just wonder, you seem like a perfectly normal person, right? About right?
I got this one. I got this question.
Why on earth would you want to do it to yourself, right? And then we'll leave it there. But it's been a real a real pleasure hosting you, Representative Gloria Johnson. We'll put up all your information to get involved and be involved in your campaign. Real pleasure hosting you.
Well, thank you. And I do have to say, 27 years teaching emotionally disturbed, behavior disordered teenagers has prepared me for this work.
Yeah, well, I was just talking to my daughter. We were on a long road trip. We were talking about the days when I was a kid. You know, there were no seat belts, no shoulder straps, right? Front seat, right? Middle seat, laying down in the back. And we were talking about school, right? And we were talking about emotionally disturbed, right? Out of fashion today, but like the problem kid of that era was called the emotionally disturbed kid, right?
Yeah.
That is, that would be the threat, if you misbehaved, you're going to the emotionally disturbed classroom, right? It would hang over you, be like, oh my goodness. But that is America's epicenter of emotional disturbance, right? Is the United States Senate. Josh Hawley, right? Frauds of such epic in titanic dimensions, right? They're almost fictional characters, but this is what you'd be signing up for.
Well, and it's pretty much what I'm doing here. And the meanness is something, we have a 74 Republicans and 25 Democrats. And in addition to being drunk with power and authoritarians, they're just mean. They're retaliatory. The first year that Cameron Sexton was up for speaker, I said I refused to vote for him. I'm not voting for a Republican speaker, and I'm certainly not voting for the Republican speaker who was instrumental in stopping Medicaid expansion in Tennessee, who also fought tooth and nail to keep the bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest in a place of honor in our Capital. Said I'm not doing it. And
Confederate general and founder of the Ku Klux Klan.
Yes, and slaughtered 300 folks who were surrendering at Fort Pillow. So I was the only one out of 99 to vote against him for speaker, and I was given a closet for an office. And then not only was I given a closet for an office, but across the hall, outside my door, I look outside my door and I see the empty member office across the hall, and that was intentional. And that was all about punishment and retaliation because I didn't step in line with what they wanted. And guess what? I'm never going to unless what they want is right. And most often it is not. And that's why it's so important that we stand up and that we push back against these extremists and against this hate. And that's why we have to win this U.S. Senate seat in Tennessee.
Perfect place to end it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on.
I'm Steve Schmidt. This is The Warning, and I invite you to subscribe on our Substack, on our YouTube channel. Follow us. Welcome to the community.